Good evening, creatures of the night. It's apparent after this episode that Dogman and werewolves are everywhere, including in my new novel, Werewolf Ranch, available exclusively, for now, on Amazon.com in both a hardcover and a paperback. If you haven't gotten your copy yet, make sure you check out the link in the description below. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. It's definitely something creepy. Have a good night, creatures of the night. Remember, Dogman is everywhere. And don't miss your chance to scream. It's strange the things your brain holds onto. Most memories fade. They go softer on the edges. They get mixed up with dreams or old stories. But some nights you remember exactly. Down to the way the air smelled. Down to the color of the sky. The first memory I have of that was 9/11. The second one was something I still can't really explain. It was 10 years ago, the summer of 2015. I was at my friend Tyler's house. We were bored, wide awake at 1 in the morning because we'd stayed up playing Xbox and eating enough pizza to kill an ox. Tyler lived outside of town, not rural enough to be isolated, but far enough that his back field ran for acres before hitting the tree line. His bedroom was on the second floor, facing that field, with an old window that squeaked like mad whenever you opened it. We'd always joked about how many horror movies started that way. Little did we know that night our lives became a horror movie. It's funny how quickly jokes become warnings, right? Well, anyway, it was late, hot, and the room smelled like energy drinks and defeat because we weren't doing very well on our Xbox game. I wandered to the window for some fresh air, shoved the latch, pushed it open, groaned at the squeaky noise. I remember the night breeze rolling in. It was still warm, but at least it was fresh. Then Tyler said behind me, "What's out there? I think I see a deer." I looked and saw the same thing that he saw, but I didn't answer because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. All I knew was something was in that field. At first it looked like a stump, a rather big one. Then it shifted. Stumps don't shift. Even though this movement was just slight, you could tell that it was alive, like an animal adjusting its weight or something. But this thing, it wasn't shaped like a deer. It wasn't even shaped like a coyote or anything we were used to seeing. This thing was too tall. And then I realized why it looked so different. Because this thing was upright. "Dude," Tyler whispered. "That's a person." "No, it's not," I told him. "It's too big." We both leaned closer, elbows on the windowsill, eyes straining in the moonlight. The thing was maybe 100 feet away. There was silvery light running across its back from the full moon overhead. It was crouched low at first, like it was sniffing the ground or listening to something. Its shoulders were huge. Twice as big as mine, it seemed. But it was more sloped than a person. The fur caught the light in patches. That's another reason I knew that it wasn't a man. Because nobody would be out there, dressed like an animal, hiding in the moonlight, at this hour, especially way back there. The fur itself, coarse and uneven. But the thing I remember the most is the silence of all of it. It was like all the bugs had stopped. Not a single cricket, not a single cicada. Just dead stillness in the air. And then we watched as it started to move again. The way it moved was slow and like it was calculated. It rose from that crouching position, but not like a bear rearing up. Bears are clumsy when they stand. You can see the effort. This thing was definitely crouching on 2 legs when we first saw it, and then it rose even higher. It stood the way that a man does, balanced and smooth and natural. Tyler grabbed my arm so hard that I had a bruise the next day. "Tell me that's a bear, dude." But I couldn't because that wasn't a bear. The creature, Dogman, though we didn't have that word for it then, let its front limbs hang in front of it like arms. From our vantage point, we could see they were long. Like way long. You could see the strength in them even from the distance that we were at. The torso was wrong for any normal animal. Narrower at the waist, wider at the shoulders, built for both speed and power. But the anatomy of this creature looked like it had been made to stand upright. If you picture the way that a dog is, and the way that an ape is shaped, it was more towards that ape portion, not a dog. Its head, we couldn't see all of it yet. Just the shape, really. We saw ears that looked very canine. We saw the back of a skull that was rigid like a wolf's, but bigger. I mean, much, much bigger. It turned slightly, like it was listening. Maybe for something in the grass, or maybe listening to our conversation. I guarantee you that it had good hearing. And then with this quick, sudden motion, it dropped back to all fours. But it didn't fall. It was like it shifted. It was like flowing water, just smooth. The limbs just reconfigured. There was no awkwardness, no struggle. Just one quick motion. I mean, 1 second, it's standing like a dude in a Halloween costume. The next, it is a massive wolf-shaped beast creeping across the field. I don't know any kind of creature that can do that. Do you? Tyler then whispered, "What in the hell is that, man?" I put my hand over his mouth. I was already certain that that creature already knew we were there because we'd already been talking, but I didn't want to give it any more reason to come and see what we were doing. We watched it prowl along the edge of the tall grass, its head low, its tail stiff. It stopped, sniffed the ground again, and then, as if deciding something, it rose back up onto 2 legs. The moon hit it just right then. We saw it clearly. I'm telling you, I almost screamed. It was towering. It was fur-covered, easily 7 feet, if not more. Some creature out of the depths of hell that I have never seen even in my worst nightmares. This thing had muscles shifting under its coat. It had hands, not paws, hanging at the sides with those arms. Its legs bent slightly like a dog's, but built to support an upright frame. The closer it got, the more these features became clear to us. Now, it was probably half as far as it was at first. Its head was unmistakably canine, but far more expressive. You could see the ears twitch, the muzzle lift, breath puff out in these long, controlled bursts. Even from the window, we could see this thing moving around like it knew what it was doing, like it was thinking instead of reacting. Tyler whispered, "That's gotta be a wolf." I looked at him and shook my head. It definitely wasn't a wolf. The Dogman, and again, we didn't say that word then. It took a step, then another. It moved like a man trying to stay silent. Yet, each step covered twice the distance that I would. Every time it paused, it was like it turned its head and listened. Every time it listened, we held our breath. At one point, it turned its body slightly toward the house. Not enough to see us, hopefully, but enough that we saw the profile of the head. And that was the moment I knew it wasn't some misidentified wildlife. The snout was long, just like a wolf, yes, but the eyes were set up in its head, like it was an ape. But again, this creature looked like a werewolf. It had eyes that reminded me of a predator. Maybe binocular vision, depth sensing vision. It was focused. I mean intensely focused on whatever it was that it was tracking out there. It had to be something small because we couldn't see it in the grass, but I feel bad for whatever that thing was looking for. We watched it for minutes, these long, drawn-out, terrifying minutes. It crossed the field multiple times, sometimes upright, sometimes on all 4 legs. It would switch between the two as casually as a man switching where he puts his hands. It never looked directly at us. It never gave a hint that it knew that we were actually there. But I swear to you, absolutely swear that this thing was thinking. It wasn't moving on instinct or reflex, it was moving on thought. And then it was like it was deciding that its business was done there. It crouched low again, sniffed the air like one more time, and glided toward the tree line. It didn't run or bound, it just slipped between the shadows until the moonlight couldn't reach it anymore and we lost sight of it. And then it was gone, just like that. Tyler closed the window softly, like he was afraid the sound might bring it back. We sat on the floor for a good half hour afterwards, not even really saying anything. But then, eventually, he muttered, "Should we call someone?" I had no idea who to call. I mean, sure, we could call the police or animal control, but it's not every day that you report a werewolf. So we just decided to pretend it didn't happen, I guess. We prayed it didn't come back, and that prayer worked because it never did. Not that we know of, anyway. But sometimes late at night, I can still picture it crossing that field. It's been a decade since it's happened now, and sometimes I still have nightmares, or sometimes I think about it more than I want and I have a really hard time going to sleep. I just remember it walking upright, then dropping to all fours like its bones were made of rubber or something, then standing tall again like nothing in nature knows how to do. It wasn't hunting us, so I guess we can feel safe about that, but it might be worse that if it knew that we were there, it didn't even care. We were beneath its notice. Two guys watching from a window while it went about whatever business a creature like that has. It's a strange kind of terror, realizing that you're so unimportant to a predator that could end your life without effort. A decade later, I still don't know what it was tracking that night, but I know without a doubt, something else was out there, and the Dogman was following it, because it had that intelligence to where it could sit there and watch and then plan what it was going to do. These things are real, and they're a lot smarter than some people think. I've worked for the county parks department for nearly 15 years now, and in that time, I've seen just about every kind of mess a person can make in the outdoors. Illegal dumps, abandoned campsites, fires left smoldering that could cause an intense blaze. You name it. But nothing, I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened last spring on this river access road. To describe this road, it isn't much. Just 3 miles of dirt carved along the edge of the East Fork River, barely wide enough for a truck. It dead ends at a concrete boat launch, which is used mostly by anglers, kayakers, the occasional teenager looking to drink cheap beer where the cops won't find them. But I drive it every morning to make sure nobody left trash or sprayed new graffiti into the bathrooms. Normally it's peaceful. Yeah, every once in a while I find a drunk teenager and have to haul him home. But usually there's this mist hanging over the river. Distant birds, deer wandering through the brush. Just lovely. Peaceful. But the morning this happened, everything felt wrong, automatically, from the very get-go. And I know how that sounds. But if you spend enough years in the woods, you get a feel for when something's off. And that day, I just knew that something was off. Although, if you'd asked me what was wrong, seeing a werewolf would have been at the bottom of my list. I noticed this, though, as soon as I turned off the highway. The forest was silent. Not quiet. I mean silent. No birds, no insects, no wildlife. Looking back, it even sounded like the river was muted, like someone had put a blanket over the whole world. And again, I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, everything that I'm sharing isn't exaggerated. At first, I just chalked it up to the weather. A storm had blown through around midnight, and everything was still damp. Maybe nature just hadn't woken up yet, you know? But about a quarter mile in, I found the first sign something wasn't normal. A fallen tree blocking half the road. It wasn't a young tree either. This one was thick, heavy. It looked like it had been ripped, not broken. The split wasn't jagged like lightning had done it. The wood was splintered outward, like something big had shouldered into it. I stopped the truck, got out, and took a closer look. The bark on the trunk was scraped in several places. There were these long, parallel marks, like 4 deep channels carved down the side. I'd seen bear claw marks before. These weren't those. They were deeper. They were cleaner. The spacing was wrong, and the shape didn't say bear to me. It said something I couldn't identify. Which is odd, because I've been doing this a really long time, and I thought I knew everything that was out there. I took a picture and radioed it in, but the response was just the usual, "We'll send a saw crew later today. Proceed with caution." So I eased the truck around the fallen tree and kept going. About a half mile later, I found something else. Footprints. Not shoe prints. Animal prints. They were in the mud, right by the road. At first glance, I thought they were from a massive dog. Maybe a Great Dane someone had let off leash, but again, the shape wasn't right for any animal that I could identify. The heel extended too far back, like a hybrid between a paw and a very long foot. The toes dug deep, each ending in a point that left little crescent-shaped gouges. And at the heel, it almost looked like there was a hook type mark. But the size, that's what made my stomach drop. Each print was nearly the length of my forearm. I crouched and just stared at them for a long minute. There were 3 in a row, heading across the road and straight into the brush toward the river access trail. Whatever made them had moved on 2 legs. The stride was too long for anything on 4. Now I know. I should have turned around right then, radioed it in, called for backup, but years of doing this job had taught me one thing. 90% of the weird stuff in the woods has a boring explanation. And the other 10%? Well, you just assume it's the 90 until proven otherwise. So I just followed my route. By the time I reached the boat launch, that bad feeling had just gotten worse. The mist was thicker here, clinging to the surface of the water like smoke. The far side of the river was invisible. Even the mountains looked erased. And then I saw the trash cans. Both of them were knocked over. Not like they were tipped, but flung. One had rolled nearly 20 yards from its concrete pad. The lid was nowhere in sight. The second can looked like someone had punched straight into it. There was a hole the size of a human head crushed through the metal. Black garbage bags were shredded across the pavement. Contents scattered everywhere. Raccoons make a mess, but they don't make a mess like that. Hell, bears that make a mess don't even do something like that. I got out of the truck slowly, scanning the tree line. The air was heavy. It was humid. The air was cold against my cheeks despite the spring morning. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the river. I bent down to start pulling scattered trash together. Instinct, really. When I noticed something glinting between 2 torn bags. At first, I thought it was a piece of foil. But I pulled it out. It was a thin strip of metal. Thin, twisted, and bent into a curve like it had been peeled from something. And the edge was smeared. Like a substance I couldn't even describe. I don't know if it was slobber or blood. It was dark. Not human blood or animal blood, but definitely a dark, dark shade of red. But I didn't even have time to process it before I heard something. A splash. Not small. Huge. Like something heavy had dropped into the water or stepped into it. I spun toward the river. The mist shifted just slightly, like something large had passed through it. For a long moment, everything was still. And then I heard breathing. Slow and deep, coming from the brush just past the edge of the pavement, hidden behind a cluster of river willows. I knew instantly this wasn't a person, or an animal that I recognized. A person doesn't breathe like that. And whatever it was, sounded enormous. But it also sounded almost engineered, like each inhale was dragged through a chest cavity too large for any normal animal. Now, I'm not gonna lie. My fight or flight instinct kicked in so hard I nearly dropped the metal strip. But I forced myself to stay still. Rule number 1. Don't provoke whatever's out there watching you. And one sure way to provoke a predator is to run. But every instinct in me almost ran when that thing stepped out. The first thing I saw was these tall, sinewy legs, digitigrade, like a canine's, but ending in something shaped disturbingly like a foot. The fur was dark, almost black, and stuck in clumps from the damp. The thigh was thick and powerful, built for sprinting. The moment I saw it, my brain screamed predator. Then the rest of it emerged too. It was upright. An upright canine. Easily 7.5, maybe 8 feet tall. Its shoulders were enormous. It was sloped like a wolf's, but the arms hanging from them were wrong. Just absolutely wrong for an animal like that. They looked more like a man's arms. The chest was barreled, the abdomen tight and lean. The head I've tried explaining before, but words always fall short. It wasn't a wolf's head slapped on a person, nor was it a man's face with fur. This was something in between. Something that didn't respect the lines nature usually draws. The snout was long. The eyes were human in a way that made my stomach twist. It looked at me like it was evaluating me. Its lips pulled back. It was a twitch of curiosity or maybe irritation, not a snarl exactly. I saw long teeth, yellowed at the tips, caught in the gray morning light. I was frozen. All those years of training just went out the window. When you see something like this that you can't identify, all logic, all reasoning, all training is just gone. And then this creature moved its head the way that a dog does to test sound, that slight tilt. But this felt deliberate, and you could see this human-like intelligence radiating off of it. It sniffed the air a few times. On the third sniff, something changed, and that creature stiffened up. It pinned its ears back like a dog going into defense mode. Its body went rigid, its muscles locking tight under the fur. I knew I'd seen too much, and then it took a step toward me. One step, just one, and that creature closed half of the distance between me and it. I stumbled back so fast I tripped over the knocked over trash can, and that sound echoed across the launch like a gunshot, metal clanging like a warning bell. That creature, that werewolf or dogman or whatever you want to call it, reacted instantly. Not with fear, but with sudden, violent motion. It lunged. Not fully, not a pounce, but this short, explosive burst forward, like it was testing how fast I'd run. I scrambled to my feet, bolted to the truck, and slammed the door shut, and in that time, the creature already reached the edge of the pavement. It stopped there, right under that overhanging mist like some bad joke from a scary movie. It stood still, chest heaving, staring at the truck as I fumbled the keys and jammed them into the ignition. The moment my engine roared to life, its lips curled again. I could see human emotion in this creature. What I was looking at was annoyance. It wasn't a creature or an animal trying to defend itself or intimidate me. This thing looked angry. I slammed the truck into reverse. Luckily, that thing didn't give chase. I've read a lot about these creatures since then, and I know a lot of times they do give chase, but thankfully, my story doesn't end that way. Not at first, anyway. I backed up 10 feet, then 20, and that's when it stepped into the road, directly in front of me. It wasn't blocking me or attacking, just watching, just letting me know. I eased around it as far as the narrow road would allow. This creature pivoted, following my truck with its head, but never moving its feet. Again, I'm telling you, the awareness in this creature was unprecedented in any type of creature that I have ever come across. No animal acts like that. Not unless you're looking at a primate, which has an intelligence similar to our own. This creature was that smart. When I finally put enough distance between us to where I felt comfortable looking back, I looked in the mirror. It was gone. No shape or shadow, no movement in the mist, just a simply empty road. I filed no official report on that. I couldn't say anything about what I saw. What I saw was impossible. It would definitely require hazard pay. You see a werewolf out in the forest and everybody laughs at you. I told my supervisor the trash site had been hit by something bigger than a bear and just needed heavier lids to solve the problem. He shrugged it off, but I know what I saw, and that's enough. I don't need to go out to the stores and tell this story. I don't need to go have a drink at the bar and share what I saw. Me knowing, me believing, that's enough. I don't care who believes me. Ever since that morning, that river access road has never felt the same. The silence there isn't peaceful anymore. It feels watchful, like the forest is holding its breath just like I am. I still do the same route. Never seen it since, but that doesn't mean that it's not out there. This thing has been smart enough for its entire existence to move around undetected. Sure, people see it, but nobody has ever gotten a good picture of it. Nobody's ever been able to find a corpse or actually identify this creature. It's not in history books and it's not in science books. It's just in our minds and our stories. Maybe one day we'll actually know what this creature is, but until then, all we have is the word of people like me that have seen this thing and swear that it's true. I don't tell this story much anymore. Honestly, I'm tired of the looks people give me. I'm tired of being accused of lying, or being confused, or sleep deprived. Honestly, though, before that night, I'd have said the same thing to anyone else telling me this story. But once you've seen something like this, once you've heard the noises that it makes, see how it moves, you don't go back to the world that you lived in before it. It happened 3 years ago. It was late October, just after the first real cold snap of the season. I was driving home from my friend's cabin in Kentucky. It was nothing fancy, just a patched up A-frame stuck between two old logging roads. I'd stayed too late helping them split wood, so by the time I left, it was close to midnight already. If you'd never driven country roads with no moon, I'll paint you a picture. Everything outside your headlights is black ink. I'm not talking dark, I'm talking gone. The world just stops where the light ends. I'd gone maybe 6 miles when my truck started making a soft knocking sound on the passenger side. I figured maybe a branch or rock had got jammed somewhere, so I pulled into a little gravel turnout beside the tree line. I left the truck running. Country road rule number 1. I cracked my door open, started listening for where the noise was coming from. And that's when I heard something that sounded more like a knock outside of my car than in it. It wasn't coming from the truck. It was coming from the woods. 2 short taps, like someone rapping their knuckles against a door. I froze. This wasn't an owl or a deer or any normal forest noise. This was intentional, like a human was out there knocking on a tree. Now, I'm a realist. I've heard stories of Bigfoot and stuff like that before. I thought maybe I had ran into one of those. You got him in Kentucky. There's a lot of weird stuff here. I told myself, most likely though, it was some woodpecker that missed the memo about bedtime. But even then, I could feel my heartbeat start to speed up. When you're in a situation like that, when you see something supernatural, something unexplainable, your body has a way of telling you before you even see something. It's like some instinct that had been dormant before I actually saw this creature. Something deep inside me telling me that something was about to be very wrong. Regardless though, I stepped out, crouched, and tried to figure out what was going on with my truck. I didn't want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere if something was really wrong. I ran my hand along the wheel well. Nothing. I stood and, after a thorough look, was about to climb back in when another sound drifted from between the trees. This time it sounded like a low growl, but not like a growl that I've heard before. And it was pretty close. It was like something was trying to be heard. I turned toward the woods, squinting. My headlights hit just the first few rows of trees, but beyond that was that inky blackness. But even though I couldn't see it at that point, I still felt it. I got that prickly sensation up the back of my neck. You know the one. The one that tells you that something or someone's staring straight at you. "Hello," I said like an absolute idiot, because what else do you say at midnight, alone on the side of the road? "Someone there?" Well, needless to say, I was greeted with silence for about 5 seconds, and then I heard what I can only describe as a very heavy breath. It was wet, and it was just from inside the tree line. Now my first thought was bear. My second thought was no bear breathes like that though. There was this cadence to it, like something trying to scent me. I backed toward my truck, keeping my eyes on the trees. I wasn't running, not yet, but every part of me was screaming to move faster. But I didn't have the chance, because before I could move, something stepped into view. At first, all I saw was legs. Long animal legs ending in something that wasn't quite a paw, but wasn't quite a foot either. It was too long and splayed. Take a dog's foot, mold it with a man's, and then stretch it to an absurd length. The light hit coarse fur after that. It was dark brown, like chocolate. It was matted all over the place, like it wasn't taking care of itself, or maybe that's just the way that its coat looked. After that, I noticed the torso. It was massive. Big, broad shoulders rising higher than the hood of my truck. The front legs I like to describe more as arms. Actual arms. And they hung at its sides like a man standing still. Now, let me get to the head. To this day, I can't explain how wrong it looked. It was shaped like a wolf, sure, but stretched out, like the feet. It was too tall, too narrow. The snout was long, yes, but the eyes, they didn't fit it right. Because these eyes looked at me like I would look at it. Not like an animal sizing me up. It was like it was sizing up a threat or trying to figure out if I was food or not. But the way it looked at me as it cocked its head, it was something a human would do. Now, like I was saying, it was on two legs, standing straight and balanced. When it stepped forward, the movement was fluid. It wasn't clumsy like a bear. It moved like it belonged that way. Like it was evolved into being a biped. My throat went dry instantly. I honestly couldn't even breathe. We just stared at each other, me and that thing, maybe 20 feet apart. I remember thinking that it should be snarling, or charging me, or doing something that made sense for a predator, but instead it tilted its head again, this time slightly to the right, and I could swear there was this curiosity behind its eyes. But that weird calm only lasted maybe 5 seconds, because then this thing's nostrils flared, and it let out a growl that rattled my limbs. It wasn't loud like you'd imagine. It was more low and subterranean, like it came from a chamber under the ground instead of a throat, and worked its way up my legs into my body. But that also broke my paralysis. I drove into the truck so fast I smacked my shoulder against the doorframe. The moment I slammed the door, that thing moved. I locked it without hesitation. It didn't run towards me. This thing charged, the way a wild animal does, but this was a mix of wildness and intelligence. 1 second, it was 10 yards away. The next, it was right there at the edge of my headlights, barreling forward like a freight train. But that freight train was made of muscles and claws. I floored it. I remember gravel spitting everywhere as the tires fought for traction. And for one horrifying heartbeat, I thought the truck wasn't going to grip. I thought that thing was going to get into my door, rip it open, and have me for dinner. The creature hit the back quarter panel with a thud that shook the whole frame. The rear fishtailed, but then the tires caught the pavement, and I shot forward down the road. I didn't look back at first. I was too busy keeping the truck on the road and not wrecking, but after about another 5 seconds, I did risk a glance in the rear view. There it was. Now it was running on all fours, though, and it was gaining on me. I've seen wolves run. I've watched videos of big cats sprinting before and after this encounter. This wasn't like that. The movements of this thing was just out of this world. Its limbs moved wrong. It was like it was too long and too flexible, and its back arched unnaturally high as it bounded after me. I floored the accelerator. I could hear my truck screaming. It was like this truck was protesting, keeping me alive. That creature kept pace for maybe 30 yards and then slowly fell back. Eventually it disappeared into the dark. But that didn't let me ease up. I kept going that speed until I hit the main highway. Even then, though, I kept checking my mirrors every few seconds, thinking that maybe that thing was going to burst out and keep following me. I didn't know what this thing was capable of. All I knew is I saw something that I didn't think existed. For the longest time, I didn't even have a word for it. I referred to it as a werewolf until I saw some video on the Sci-Fi Channel. The next morning, I found the dents in the rear panel. Deep ones, like fingers had dug into the metal. I took pictures, showed my buddy. He said it looked like someone had taken a crowbar to it, and you know what? I didn't argue. I still can't drive that stretch of road at night. Not alone. Not ever, really. And here's the thing that keeps me up. When it looked at me, like really looked, this thing wasn't confused, and it wasn't behaving like an animal reacting to some strange creature in its territory. It knew what a human was. Or worse, it understood what a human was. Honestly, I don't know which one's more terrifying. Hi, Tales of the Supernatural. My name's Clyde, and I've lived in Montana most of my life. My family moved there when I was 2 years old. I've grown up there, in the woods, tracking and hunting. I thought I've seen every type of animal that state has to offer, but I was wrong. I've seen grizzlies crossing a logging road, elk herds moving through a valley, a mountain lion on a rock outcropping staring down at me during hunting season once. I know what regular animals look like. I know what they sound like, and I know what they act like. What I'm about to tell you was none of those things. My wife Jenna and I bought our place about 8 years before it happened. It's a modest house, outside a small town. It has a detached garage and a big backyard that turns into forest without much warning. Where we live, there's no fences. No neat line, just grass, then bush, then trees, that's it. So it's kind of like the forest is our backyard. We have 2 kids. Oliver was 11, Emma was 9 at the time. They love the yard. They love the forest. In the summer, they run all the way to the tree line, pretend the woods are some kind of enchanted kingdom or something, and keep going. Back then, they were fearless. After the stories I told them about what I saw that night, they're a little apprehensive to go back into the woods, and I don't blame them. And they never go alone anymore. We've seen deer back there and foxes, more rabbits than we can count. We also get bears once or twice a year, but mostly in the fall when they're hungry and bold. Because of that, I keep a rifle handy. When this happened, it was September, a Thursday night to be exact. The air had the edge to it that says winter isn't far off, but it was still enjoyable outside. It was clear and cold. By the time we put the kids to bed that night, the stars were already thick over the trees. Out there, there's not a lot of people. It's how we like it. It's peaceful. Till that night. Jenna and I went to bed around 10:30. I remember that because she was joking about how old we'd become. Going to bed before 11 o'clock? I told her it wasn't because I was old. It's because I had an early morning. We laughed it off, turned off the lamp, and that was it. Sometime after midnight, though, I woke up. At first, I didn't even know why. The house was nice and quiet. The digital alarm clock glowed right before 1 o'clock. Jenna was asleep on her side facing away from me, and down the hall, the kids were asleep with their doors closed. It was that kind of still, deep quiet you only get when you live away from traffic and neighbors. I almost rolled over and went back to sleep, but then I started hearing noises from outside. It was metal. It was faint but clear. Not a crash, more of a clank and a scrape. The garage. We keep an old chest freezer out there, and the trash cans sit by the side door. The sound had that hollow, thin ring you get when something bumps the metal lid or shoves it aside. My first thought was bear. My second was raccoon. Either way, though, I didn't want whatever it was out there getting comfortable. Not only could it make a mess, but it could endanger my kids. My plan was to just go out there and chase it off. So I slid out of bed, careful not to wake Jenna. I stood there for a moment listening. There it was again. Scrape. A light knock. Something shifting around. Too controlled for the wind. Too slow for anything to just be falling over. Something was out there, that was for sure. So I went to the front closet, grabbed my heavy sweatshirt and my boots. No rifle yet. At that point, I still assumed I'd clap my hands, yell, and watch a dark shape of some animal bound off into the trees. It's happened plenty of times before, and that would just be the end of it. In the kitchen, I took the big flashlight from its hook by the back door. I eased the door open and stepped onto the small concrete stoop. I didn't want to spook whatever it was just yet, because I wanted to know for curiosity's sake what it was that was out there. I remember the cold hitting my face, clean and sharp. It almost made me suck in a big gulp of air, but I was determined to figure out what was out there. The sky above the yard was clear. It was thick with stars, a beautiful Montana night. The garage sat about 40 feet from the back of the house, off to the left. The motion light above its side door glowed. There was this dull yellow coming from it. I'd always meant to change it so it was brighter, but what are you going to do, right? Right then the sound stopped. I figured something had heard me and was already taking off. So I stood there for a second, letting my eyes adjust. Nothing moved in that yellow circle of light. The trash cans stood where they should be, lids on. The garage door was closed. The side door looked shut. I didn't know what type of animal was out there, and I didn't know what it was out there doing, but I still wanted to know. So I swept the flashlight beam across the yard. All I saw was grass, shadow, tree trunks, nothing. I thought to myself that I'd spooked it and missed my chance to see what it was. But still, I stepped down from the stoop and started across the yard, making sure that nothing else was out there. But what I noticed was it didn't sound like anything else was out there. There was no animal noise at all, just my own steps. And then halfway to the garage, this smell overwhelmed me. It wasn't our garbage. It wasn't a dead animal either. What I was smelling was heavy and musky. It actually felt thick in the air. And it felt wrong out there in the open. It was like whatever had made that smell wasn't too far off. And it actually made the small hairs on my arms stand up even though they were under the sweatshirt. I guess you can chalk that up to getting the creeps or just kind of feeling that something was still out there with me. I stopped and listened to the motion light humming. The beam from my flashlight was trembling a bit in my hand, and honestly, I'm not sure if it was from nerves or the cold. And then something shifted in the shadows between the garage and the tree line. I raised the flashlight and pointed it at the gap. At first, I thought it was just a pile of yard debris that I'd forgotten about, like a dark shape against the shadows, a bulk in the background. But then it moved. This thing unfolded from the ground in a way that made my stomach drop. It was like it was looming over me. At first, it was on all fours, shoulders higher than a big dog's, body long and lean but solid. It had dark fur, and it covered everything that I could see. This fur wasn't patchy, it was thick, like a husky or a wolf. The beam only caught parts of it at first, but the fur absorbed a lot of the light. The details came through in fragments, or maybe that's just my brain and how it works, but there was an outline of a back that I remember, a curve of a rib cage, powerful front legs, and then I saw its head turn toward me. This muzzle I saw was short, but definite. It wasn't a bear's broad snout, but it wasn't long like a wolf's either. It was somewhere in between. It was narrow with a strong jawline. The ears stood like a husky's or a wolf's as well. They stood high, and they were alert, like they were moving, taking in the sound. And its eyes reflected the flashlight beam in this pale, steady shine of yellow. I froze. I couldn't shout, I couldn't wave my arms to chase this thing off, and I definitely wasn't clapping to scare it away. It was like my body was locked in shock. For a second, neither me nor that thing moved. I remember the chest rising slowly, like it was just breathing gently. This thing wasn't intimidated, and it wasn't aggressive either. I could even hear its breathing over the distance. Those lungs sounded powerful. But then the smell grew stronger, thick in the air, like it could emit that odor like a weasel or a skunk. The animal, or whatever it was, took 3 quick strides away from the garage, in the opposite direction of me. It was moving toward the tree line. It moved smoothly, the muscles under its fur shifting with each step. It covered that distance fast, but it wasn't running flat out, more like this controlled retreat. But then it stopped, and it turned around. And then the damnedest thing happened. It stood up on 2 legs. I watched its spine straighten. I saw that happen with my own 2 eyes. I saw the shoulders roll back. I saw the front legs, which I realized at that point were more like arms than legs at all. They pulled upwards until they hung down at its sides. This thing went from standing like an animal and having these animalistic qualities to standing like a man and looking more human in an instant. Like it didn't have a problem shifting at all. I just remember this noise, this spine cracking, and then it was up. Like its entire body, repositioned just so it could stand up. My brain rebelled. I tried to make it a man in a suit, a trick, anything other than what I was actually looking at. But the fur didn't end anywhere. This was not a man in a suit. That fur covered the body from head to toe. The chest was so wide it didn't look real. I could see thick muscles even under the hair. Those arms were so long that they hung low by the knees. I could make out these fingers that were thick and strong and ending in dark curved claws. It faced me directly. The head stayed the same shape. Canine, a snout, teeth, ears, but now that it was upright, the shoulders and the chest and the arms made it clear this was not any animal that I knew. My heart was pounding harder than it ever has in my entire life. My hand tightened on the flashlight until my palm hurt, but I didn't move, because some part of me knew that running was just a horrible, horrible idea. So we just stared at each other. That thing, it wasn't panting or huffing, just breathing steady and deep. That pale reflection in its eyes stayed locked on me. Its posture was straight. It had the kind of stillness that comes from complete control. That's the only way that I know how to describe that. My mind finally kicked in and knew that I had to take some kind of action. So I started backing up. I took slow steps, one foot behind the other, keeping my eyes on it, not turning my back, because I knew if I did, that thing might think that I was prey. The flashlight beam danced over this thing, its chest, its face, its legs. Then it dropped to its hands, then back up. As I was walking, I got every detail I saw, and it drove home that this wasn't a costume, not some neighbor messing with me. The hair along its shoulders stuck up slightly. The muscles in its thighs shifted when it shifted its weight just a fraction. This wasn't a trick. I was looking at something that I'd only seen in Hollywood. It didn't advance, but it didn't retreat either. It just watched me pull away. I reached the stoop and felt the concrete against my foot. I reached back with my free hand, found the doorknob and twisted. The door opens inward, thank God, so I didn't have to turn my back on that creature. I stepped in, never taking my eyes off of that thing until the door frame cut it off. Then I shut the door and threw the deadbolt, more out of reflex than logic. Jenna's voice came from the hallway and scared the life out of me. "Clyde, what's going on?" She stood there in an old t-shirt and sleep pants. Her hair was messy, eyes squinting against the light, but at that moment she was the most beautiful thing that I'd ever seen in my life. It was like reality versus a nightmare outside. All I told her was there was something big out by the garage, but even my voice sounded flat to my own ears. She asked me if it was a bear. I told her it wasn't. That answer seemed to wake her up faster than coffee ever had. She asked what I meant, what it was that I saw. I told her that I didn't know, and that scared her more than if I'd given it a name. I stepped past her into the hallway, went to the closet, pulled out the rifle case. I unzipped it and took out the 30-06 and grabbed a handful of rounds from the top shelf. She asked me what I was doing. I told her I'm not letting that thing hang around where my children play. I'm going out there. I want it gone. She asked if I should call someone, the sheriff maybe. I told her not yet. I pushed the rounds into the magazine with fingers that didn't feel entirely steady. And I told her, if I fire, you call. If I yell, you call. If I don't come back, you call. Until then, you just keep the kids in their rooms. Don't let them look outside. And don't come out either. Do you understand? I saw her eyes fill with this kind of fear that I'd never seen on her face before. She just shook her head and said she promised. She told me to be careful. I told her, I mean it, Jenna. Keep the kids away from the back windows if they wake up. You lock the doors and you all stay inside. If you hear a shot or you hear me call for help, you call the sheriff and tell them you heard something large on the property and your husband went out with a gun. They'll come, but until they do, you stay inside. I went back to the kitchen. I grabbed the flashlight. I picked it up and slung the rifle over my shoulder like I was getting ready to go into battle. My heart was thudding again, so hard I could barely feel my fingers. My head felt clearer, though. I had the gun in my hands. Training and habit settled over me. Safety check, barrel clear, grip firm. I unlocked the back door, opened it slowly, and stepped out again, ready to face that monster. The yard looked the same, silent, empty, but that horrible smell of musk lingered in the air. It was heavy and animal and wrong all at once. The motion light on the garage was still on. It was shining over the trash cans and the concrete pad, but there was nothing there. That thing was gone from where it stood, too. For an instant, I hoped that maybe it had ran off. I raised the flashlight and swept it across the yard, then toward the garage, then toward the tree line. At first, I saw nothing but trunks and undergrowth, but then the beam landed on eyes. They were further back now, about 10 feet into the trees, behind two thick trunks. The rest of its body blended with the darkness, and the vertical lines of the trees made this thing almost invisible. But the eyes and the very, very thin outline of a head was visible. It hadn't left. It had just moved back. I lifted the rifle from my shoulder and held it steady. The barrel angled slightly down, but on line with where it stood. I didn't point it directly at that thing yet. I wanted to see what it would do. As soon as I moved the rifle into position, that creature reacted though. Its posture changed completely. The shoulders tensed up. The head lowered a fraction. Its lips peeled back enough to show teeth. It wasn't a roar or anything dramatic like that, just enough for me to see long, sharp canines. And the sound that came from its throat was deep and rough, almost too low to even make sense of. It shifted 1 foot forward, pressing it into the ground with this pressure like it was about to charge. I saw the size of this foot. I saw the claws on it. Those were eviscerating type weapons on its feet and hands. I brought the rifle up another inch, not quite aiming still, more of a gesture, a warning. This damn thing's eyes dropped to the gun. There was no mistaking it. Its gaze tracked from my face to the rifle, focused on the barrel, and then back up into my eyes. The growl changed tone. It was more agitated now. Its hands flexed. I saw the claws extend, then curl back slightly like it was trying to think of what to do. For a second, I thought it might advance. Something in the way it shifted weight hinted at that possibility. It could have covered that distance between us fast. Faster than I wanted to imagine. Maybe even faster than I could react. Instead, it made a different choice though, and I thank God every night since then. It straightened to its full height, shoulders squaring, as if to show me exactly what it was capable of. It held that pose for a slow, heavy breath. Then it took 1 step back, then another, eyes never leaving mine. Retreating in the same gesture that I had. Not turning its back, not breaking eye contact, just moving backwards slowly. I kept the rifle up, safety off, every muscle tight. I decided right then that if it took another step forward instead of back, I would fire. But luckily it didn't. It moved slowly into the deeper dark. Its breath was still audible. Its growl was fading though. The eyes were the last thing that I saw. These twin reflections in the beam of my flashlight. Then there was only the thick pattern of trunks and branches like this thing disappeared right into nothingness. I stayed in that position for a long moment, just listening. I couldn't hear brush crackling anymore. I just heard the gradual return of normal night sounds. Eventually, I lowered my rifle. I walked to the garage, every nerve still alive, and swept the flashlight around. I wanted to make sure that that thing hadn't circled around. The trash cans were untouched, the lids were still on. There was no claw marks or anything like that on the side door. Nothing obviously disturbed except for one thing. On the ground, between the garage and the tree line, the grass was flattened in a long patch, like that thing had laid there. The depression was deep, too deep for a regular dog. It stretched farther than it should have for even a big man lying down. I backed up to the house without turning my back on the forest completely, and then I went inside. I locked the door, walked down the hall in absolute silence. Honestly, I think I was in some state of shock. Jenna stood at the kids' doorways listening. She looked at me and asked what happened. All I told her is that it was gone, at least for now. She asked what it was. I told her I didn't know, but it walked on 2 legs and it didn't belong in our yard or anywhere in that forest. I told her that it honestly looked like a werewolf. She asked me if I was being serious. I told her that I was. I told her that it even looked like it understood what a gun was and decided to leave. She looked at me and asked, "It really understood what a gun was?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it did." Neither of us went back to sleep that night. I stayed up in the living room with the rifle across my lap until dawn, staring at the backyard through the closed curtains. Jenna went back and forth between both the kids, making sure they were okay. Laying with our son for a little bit, then moving on to our girl. I half expected that thing to return, but it never did. The only person that I ever told eventually was my friend Dale. That was about a week later. He owns the place down the road. His property backs up to the same forest. I left out most of the details and just said I'd seen some strange things the other night. He said it was probably some big dog dumped out there. I told him dogs don't stand up on 2 legs. He asked me what I was talking about. I reluctantly gave him a few more details. He didn't tell me that I was lying or crazy. He just sat there lost in thought. I think he accepted it. Over the next month, word went around town that a few deer had been found dead along the county road and deeper in the woods. Hunters talking at diners and gas stations mentioned it. They were saying something about unusual predation. Now the thing is, the deers weren't eaten the way normal predators do. That's what stuck with me. According to Dale, the deer's ribs were broken inward and the wounds looked more like something had hit it and torn them apart rather than the clean work of a wolfpack or a cougar. Said maybe it was a bear, maybe it was a big dog, and that's what people believed. But nobody saw what I saw. I never saw it again. We still live in that house. The kids still play out in the yard, although they're a lot more grown than they were back then. They know the rules, they know what happened. I put in more motion lights the day after that, especially a brighter one over by the garage. Finally got that off my bucket list. Jenna was really happy about that. I started carrying a sidearm when I walk around the property at dawn or dusk. But sometimes I stand at the back door at night, looking out into the dark line of the trees. The forest has never changed. It's always there, quiet and indifferent. The yard looks the same, just empty. The garage and the garbage can still sit where it was. But if I stare long enough, my mind starts to fill in details that aren't there. Maybe a shifting motion between tree trunks, a darker patch that seems to breathe, that memory of yellow eyes reflecting in the light. Maybe that thing moved on. Maybe it was just passing through altogether and that was just a random coincidence. But maybe it's still out there, further back, hunting deer, avoiding houses. This thing knows how to be sneaky. It knows how to go undetected. And they're not going to be that easy to find unless they want to be found.